We're good.
Okay, so we got a couple guys from Minnesota, Joe Bricko and Dylan Maki. I don't know the guys, but I've for probably 4 or 5 years been watching them have a very successful tournament. Whether they're running all over the place, I know they won a huge tournament last year in the Graha, but they've been doing really well in the AIM series also. So, they're fun to watch. And we talked with Tom last week, and these are the top two teams that are going into the final AIM championship, which is this Friday and Saturday up in Lake Superior. And one of you guys, maybe you want to just recap your season, how it's went, and how you're feeling going into the last event.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess to start, I would take us back to April. It's when our tournament season started, and kind of came in a little bit of an odd way because we weren't gonna fish the first event, because with the AIM format, they take the top 3 scores. They'll fish 4 events, and you can take your top 3 plus the state championship, and that's the cumulative points for team of the year, and then to go on to nationals. And the first event, the schedule came out. The first event came up, and it was on the Mississippi River. Ironically, the closest fishery to my house where the AIM had actually stopped, but our least favorite by far. So we decided that we weren't going to fish it. And one of our teammates, like 2 nights before the event, got us all rallied up. It had been a long winter, and we all signed up for it. And Dylan and I went down there and zeroed. So I think what that did is it lit a little bit of a fire underneath us, and kind of a reminder that you got to dig back in. We came off a really good season last year, had the Graha win, ended up on Cass, fished the MWC, and had a good event as well. Ended up in the money somewhere. I can't exactly remember what place it was, but I think we came out and we weren't really in game mode. So I told him, well, maybe this is meant to be, and this was a wake up call that we got to get back in the tournament frame of mind and get our gear right and get our heads back in the thing. And we haven't looked back since. We fished 7 events since then, and we have 7 top 10s in a row, and second in there and a third in there, and now recently a first on Vermilion. So it's been a great season. I'd say it's the best season that we've had as far as where our finishes have ended up. So we're hoping to keep this momentum rolling, and we're chasing Tom, as you probably heard on your last interview. So part of the reason we agreed to take this is because we figured you'd give us some of that behind the scenes stuff and get some down and dirty.
Well, real quick, so before we go too far, so you fish the AIM, but that's 4 events. And then are you fishing are there any other events that you fish just besides the AIM?
Yeah, there is. We mentioned the Graha, which is in Dylan's hometown. That's in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And that's a real big tournament. A lot of local bragging rights, really high payouts, a really cool weigh-in where you pull your boats into an ice arena, and there's a big crowd, and they do a big thing on the stage. So it's I would call it the best local tournament that there is as far as the way they do the weigh-in and the size of the payouts and being able to pull into an arena. It's a really cool thing. So that's a big one for us. We'll do an MWC event. We fish on Cass. We did the Lund event on Ottertail, the Lund Mania, which is a pretty big gathering, and a lot of really good sticks in that, and we were able to, with limited pre-fish, take 4th in that. So nice. We fish a variety of different things along with the AIM.
Very good.
Have you guys ever fished Bemidji?
Oh yeah, absolutely, quite a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, the AIM state championship was there in, I believe, 2018, Joe, 18 or 19, something like that.
Yep. So we were able to qualify for nationals through fishing the state championship on Bemidji. So
yep.
Well, I lived out there for 10 years, and it was a pretty cool area. I moved out there from Washington State, probably 2002, and that's kind of where I grew up fishing Devil's Lake actually, but I've been all over the place. But when I went back to Bemidji, I really hadn't fished much for years, and it was pretty cool to move to an area. And I was like, okay, I got to buy a boat again. And I went to Corner Sports right there in Bemidji, bought a 2004 Lund Explorer, which I still have. It's still sitting outside.
Nice.
And man, the hours on that boat are unmatched, I would think. And it's been everywhere in this country for walleye. It's been way up in Canada, way out here in the Columbia River. And but Bemidji is that whole area, man. I never went to Pokegama. Unfortunately, I never really had to go away from Bemidji. There were so many Great Lakes right there. We used to have a once a week Tabor's Bait had a league night, and it was so fun. We'd all pull into Tabor's at 5 o'clock or 4:30, and Ron would draw a local within half an hour of Bemidji, pull a lake out of the hat, so nobody could pre-fish. I think it was on we had a Tuesday night and a Thursday night, and it would be like a NASCAR race. I'm surprised nobody ever got pulled over or a ticket, because whoever got to the lake first, and there were lakes I'd never been to, like Three Island Lake, which is a very small lake and had some real nice fish. And it was really fun fishing around there. I never got to go over to Pokegama, but I've always heard that that's a really fun lake. And I know when you guys won it last year, it was pretty cool to see you guys kick some butt out there. Was that a close one, or did you guys dominate that one? I don't remember what the final stats were.
I think it was under pound and a half, maybe 2 pounds at most.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah. Yep.
How many boats were in that tournament?
It always fills at 100.
Nice. So that's a pretty cool one to win. And you guys, I remember I saw the check. You guys won about 18,000 or something for that one.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, it has one of the best payouts of any single day event in the state. Actually, I believe it's probably the highest.
Yeah, I think
so.
It's
really good payout. With those kind of dollar values, it brings the best anglers. There's always a handful of NWT guys and the best local talent around.
Right.
Now, is that driven from sponsorship or is that driven from entry fees?
Well, it's a combination. They do a very nice job of getting some nice sponsors, but it is a little higher entry fee as well. And then it's 100% payback too. So that helps being a single day.
Sure.
Yeah. That's one other thing that, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the AIM format. How does that process actually go down when you pull into the tournament? I'm assuming you guys have a driver's meeting like most formats the night before, but I'd love to hear exactly how that format goes.
Yeah, I can touch on that. We love the AIM format just because it allows you to fish for big fish. I think that big fish are harder to catch. That's what I like to go target. And it's the only format that really allows you to do that because you're not in violation of any of the state rules. So here in Minnesota, you guys are probably aware, you can only keep one fish over 20 inches. So anytime there's a weigh tournament in the state of Minnesota, it ends up being either getting the fish in the right order, which to me is probably not the best fisherman on that day. There's a little bit of a luck when you get certain bites in any kind of a live weight tournament because you want to get your 19-inch fish, and then you're not fishing for big fish. Bigger fish are harder to fool, they're harder to catch. So if you get lucky and get your big fish right away and get a really big over, and then you get your 19s in the perfect order, you're probably going to win a live weight tournament. To me, there's some luck there. But with the AIM format being photo catch release, you're just going out and trying to catch the biggest, fish possible. Like on Lake Vermilion that we just won, our smallest fish was 27 3/4. So it's you're we had 28s and 29. So I mean that's obviously the perfect bag that you want. So it allows you to go chase after those big fish. And that's why I fell in love with the AIM format, doing the photo catch release. And I think a lot of people will say, well, what about cheating? I think it'd be harder to cheat in the AIM than it would in a partnered live weight tournament, because you have to rely on people not calling when you can't call. And I think that's a bigger temptation. Now with the AIM, there's a very rigid process to this, and all the photos are reviewed. So it'd be very hard to actually cheat. So I think it cleans up on a lot of that too.
Do you have to do a release video or just a photo?
So there's a measuring board that's issued by AIM, and then you have to take the first photo and see the nose of the fish touching the judge ruler, and then within the same photo, be able to clearly see where that fish measures. That's the first picture, and then you pick it up and get a picture of the other side of the fish as well. So it's a picture on the measuring board. The fish's belly is to the belly of the person, and then you pick that fish up and take a picture of the other side of that fish, and then the fish is released at that point.
So you're getting both sides of the fish to represent, like, let's say if you did happen to, and I know it can happen, you can catch, I have seen it happen before, you can catch the same fish within 5 minutes. I have 100% seen that happen before. And is that to keep that from happening where somebody, and I would assume even though, let's say you did catch the same fish, it's not going to be valid. Is that correct?
That is correct. No, I've been told that walleyes have a unique scale pattern, kind of like a human being would have, a fingerprint, unique fingerprint. So they do have the ability to run that through some software to see if those fish are duplicates. So let's say I caught a 28, I threw it in the live well, I kept fishing and tried to mix that fish in later on. That would be picked up and flagged through their process. So that would eliminate the ability for a duplicate. You'd for surely have a lie detector, because you could still say that you caught the same fish, and that is part of their process too, which keeps the integrity of the format.
That technology has been around forever. So I'll go back to like 2008. So when I lived in Bemidji, before I started going up to Lake Winnipeg, there was a website that's now defunct called bountyfishing.com, and they had weekly big fish prizes for pike, crappie, bluegill, every species. And I kept seeing the same name, Aaron Weeb, winning pretty much every single week, whether it was crappie, walleye, pike. And I ended up, this was about, I think it was 2007. I went, that was the first trip up to the Red River. And at 2:00 in the morning, I got stuck on the Red River in an area called End of Maine, where the wind was blowing through. And I'm out there with a buddy, complete idiots, not prepared. The first time anybody goes to Lake Winnipeg, you are not prepared. And we pulled a sleeper house to Lake Winnipeg and instantly got it buried. And so my buddy Zach and I are out there shoveling at 2:00 in the morning, trying to get this sleeper house to where we could back it up and try to get turned around. And all of a sudden there's headlights coming towards us at 2:30 in the morning. And it was Aaron Weeb. And that's how I met Aaron back in about 2007. And we've actually been buddies for a long time. And that guy, if Aaron had the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? If he wanted to be a professional walleye fisherman, he'd be extremely good. But for some reason, he doesn't have that tournament mentality in him. And out of all the guys I've ever fished with, though, he's number one. But he's just not, he doesn't focus on any of that stuff. And you don't hear from Aaron. I don't hear from him very often. Occasionally at 2:00 in the morning, I'll get about 50 texts from him catching up on what's been going on in his life. But that technology has been around forever. Back then in 2007, 2008, bounty fishing had weekly prizes, and they could tell, just like you said, a fingerprint of a fish. And I have personally, where I live out in Washington, there's one specific fish that my buddy Dan Graham and I over a span of 7 years, we caught that same fish off of the exact same pile of trees in 7 years and watched it go from a 12 to a 15 to a 17 and a half.
Wow.
And it had there's no doubt about it. It had a big black streak on one side of it, and it had a chopped tail. And just like big bucks, they do go back to the same areas. And that's another, a lot of people talk about catch and release, like, well, they don't produce as many eggs when they're 32, 33 inches. I always go back to this, like, yeah, but wouldn't you want to throw that fish back and come back next year when that water temp is 46.5 degrees, when it's March 3rd or whatever the date might be, and hope that that fish is there, because your chances are way higher than they're ever going to be, because I've actually seen it happen. So
yeah, and that's another reason we like the format. They can get released right away. I think everybody knows that these summer tournaments, when you catch a fish at 8 a.m. and you bounce around all day in 4-footers, that fish has a pretty slim chance of living. So we know these fish go back right away, and that's good, because you're fishing for big fish. And a lot of these lakes we go back to year after year, and probably are catching some of the same fish if you're fishing generally in the same spot. So it's good for conservation that way. And selfishly, I like to just fish for big fish. And I really feel like when I win the name event, we were actually the best angler on the water that day. I look at the other formats, and I can honestly say that, it wasn't the best angler that won. They won in that format. Doesn't mean they had the best program going or caught the most fish or anything like that.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to see, like you talking about with that software, if they could go back to lakes that they had fished previous years and run some of the pictures through that software and see how many of those fish are caught again.
See if they're duplicate. Yeah, that'd be
it's a very time consuming. It's a very time consuming process. But the fish, like the scar is going to change over years. The blemish is going to change, but it's definite. I mean, there's no doubt when you have the same fish, and a lot of people probably think that it is true. I mean, it is like a fingerprint. Every fish. I mean, back when they had Polaroids, you couldn't. I mean, you can get macro pictures of these fish and zoom them in, and there is a pattern to all these fish. So it's definitely possible. But I know bounty fishing back then had, at least they claimed that they had a program that could decipher whether somebody was trying to enter. Like, let's just say somebody caught a 33-inch fish and had an elaborate live well system at home. That was probably their reasoning for it, is to avoid, someone from trying to pull some shenanigans like that. And now we're 12, 14 years later, so the technology has gotten way better. And there's, as far as cheating goes, like Joe was saying, I mean, unfortunately, it seems like every year we hear of somebody that's got a dog kennel out on a lake full of fish. I cannot imagine why you would ever want to go to that extent to try to win a tournament instead of putting the effort in and feeling good about it. But there are people out there. There was a big controversy a couple of years ago in the bass world. I think the name, I shouldn't even say his name, but I know I do remember it. But he was snagging big largemouth on beds, and he was a very well-known bass guy. And somebody finally probably knew what he was doing and caught him on video, bed fishing and snagging these giant largemouth. So there's always people that are going to be going for that type of recognition, and they eventually will get caught. So cheaters are going to cheat.
Yeah, and that's always the problem. That's why it takes a lot of resource to do these tournaments and a lot of cost to just try to keep the integrity of it. And there's no quicker way to ruin a tournament series than have a bunch of rumblings of, unfair or people cheating. So that's a big part of trying to run these, and a big part of the complication of doing it.
Yeah. Right. Hey, Dylan, what would you say as far as you guys' tournament success? I know that there's always a gamut of, trolling, jigging, casting, whatever. But what do you guys think you rely on as far as let's say, searching for fish, what would be your number one?
Boy, our number one way to search for them is probably just finding them on the live scope. I wouldn't say that we have a certain search bait or a certain search technique. I mean, that kind of techniques are kind of different for every lake that we go to. But just I would say it's more relying on electronics than it is a certain search bait or anything like that.
You're
Yeah,
not
that,
throwing you're not throwing 10-inch swim baits like Tom and trying to get these fish. Like when he told me that story, that's amazing. I mean, it really is to go outside the box and try stuff like that and see him go to Lake of the Woods and win that tournament against guys that are out there cranking and probably catching huge fish. That's very impressive hearing that story that he told last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to crack that code on Lake of the Woods, you know, it seems like I was up there a couple summers ago with live scope, and it just seems so daunting and undoable. I mean, there's thousands of miles of water up there that you can do that on, and I bet you I live scoped for an hour or so, and I thought there's no way you can do this. So I mean, it's just kind of like what Tom referred to in his podcast. You know, you just really do have to spend the time and put your trust and faith into it and keep doing it. And eventually you will figure something out with it. You can't give up.
So go back to what you were just saying as far as, you know, Lake of the Woods. Okay, so you come across just a massive body of water,
Yep.
right? And so you're trying to find some place to start. And like you said, you were trying to live scope. Do you guys ever do like the high speed?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess what I meant by that, you know, running around with your 2D at 25 to 30 miles an hour till you see a school. Yeah. Absolutely. But then you throw the live scope down and it seems like every mark is 100 to 200 yards apart. You know what I mean? So it just seems like it takes forever to get to the right marks. Like there's, you know, in 8 hours time, you might only come across 5 or 6 fish. But if they're the right fish, then it's worth it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it too. A lot of people can understand, you know, our approach, maybe Tom's approach, or a lot of the guys that are using technology to their advantage. But the harder part is erasing all the old memories. So Dylan's talking about Lake of the Woods. Forever, that's been a trolling bite, and it still is today. I mean, most tournaments you see up there being one trolling. Now, can it be one with some different methods using live scope? Absolutely. Tom proved that. But you're fighting all those old bad habits, and old habits die really hard. So even if you know that it can be done, you go out there and you instantly start second guessing yourself, and it's just so easy to revert back to what you know. Yep. And Dylan and I have even fought that a little bit. This is your number 3 running live scope, and the learning curve was pretty steep because when things aren't going right, or you're not seeing the fish that you expected to see, and you maybe go, you know, an hour, it's super easy just to go back to the old ways. And that's what was happening. And you really have to get over the hurdle of that, and you have to really dedicate to it, and just not clock watch, and just you got to totally marry it and know that you're going to come across, you know, 5 of the right fish, because we're, you know, in the aim, you're trophy hunting. I mean, you only need 5 bites. You don't even need 6 bites. You just got to land all 5. And the nice part about live scope is you can chase big fish and have at least a better idea that you're on bigger fish. So, but there's times, you know, even on Vermilion, where we had a 2-hour span where we didn't see a single fish. Now, in the old days, we'd go, well, that's 2 of our 8 hours gone with not a single mark. You would panic, and you'd go back to doing what you always did, pulling a Lindy rig blind, or jig fishing, or whatever you're doing on you know, different pieces of structure that you were familiar with, that you had old good past memories on. But we just stuck with the program, and you know, 2 hours later you see the right mark and you catch it. So it's you got to be pretty mentally tough to do it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know when I get into a panic and we're doing tournaments, and I'm, like you said, you're clock watching, I'm going, oh crap, we're running out of time, man. And my biggest fallback is to go and and trolling cranks. That's just okay. That's it. We can't get him jigging, can't get him doing other things. Put the cranks on, kick it up, let's go. It just it's like you said, it's one of those things where it's a hard habit to break when you're doing something that maybe you're not familiar with, maybe new water, and so go back to what I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, you do. You go back to what you're comfortable with and what you did growing up, what your dad showed you, what your grandpa taught you, and what you just kind of revert back to those old memories. They die pretty hard. So this is a total shift of thinking. It's an entirely different way to fish. So for me, I'm quite a bit older than Dylan, so I got a lot more years of running Lindy rigs and throwing a traditional jig. And so for me, it was actually probably a little bit harder to go through that learning curve. So there is that too. I kind of feel bad for some of the real old tournament guys because you're trying to break habits of, 40, 50 plus years. I'm trying to break habits of 22 years. Dylan's trying to break them of 8? So
they like 4.
Yeah. So no, it is an interesting phenomenon because you can change a lot faster when you haven't done something a certain way. The bad habit isn't, or memories aren't as sunk in through so many years. I think there is some truth to it. You see in some higher level tournaments are starting to be dominated by a lot of young guys. That's because technology is advancing so fast. I believe that they're truly the early adopters of new techniques, and they'll stick with it because they don't have all that past, what I would call head trash. So
right. But there's hope for the old guys. If you just focus on trying to evolve your years of experience into today's technology, maybe you got to bring a young chap out fishing with you, but it's there for you waiting. You just have to put the effort, and it really is. I talked with Lonnie last week. We were talking to Tom. Like, I know a few guys that have sold Live Scope right away. I'm like, hey, man, it's not for everybody. But if you actually put the effort into any of these forward-facing technologies, at some point a light switch is going to come on, and it doesn't mean you have to just use that way of fishing. Like, I'm assuming that you guys I have no clue what Lake Superior is like. I would guess it's somewhat like the other Great Lakes. It's a huge body of water, and there might be some structure out there, but I would bet that there's also some suspended fish this time of the year. So I would think that you're going into that tournament ready to use any method in your arsenal to catch these fish. And that's one thing I've learned is you cannot go into any body of water thinking this is how I'm going to catch them, because curveballs are going to be thrown, whether it's weather or just the fish doing whatever they want to do. So you kind of got to go into them with an open mind. And if you're lucky, they're going to go the way that you want them to go. But talk a little bit about Lake Superior, because most of us have no clue about Lake Superior.
Yeah. So to answer that would be really dependent on when the show is going to air.
Tomorrow. Well, I figured that.
It's we got a little bit of time in, but like Lake of the Woods, it's massive out there. You can think whatever you want sitting here at home, and we're just gonna go find this pizza structure and we're gonna live scope. You get out there and you feel really tiny. It's it's a needle in an absolute haystack. It's another body of water where it's been dominated with trolling, just because you can connect with fish at 2.5 miles an hour a lot faster than sitting there methodically trying to pick out fish. And there's the weird part about the Great Lakes, the interesting part is structure isn't necessarily structure like you and I would be thinking as walleye anglers. Structure can come in the form of a current seam in the water. It can come in the form of a little bit warmer pocket of water. It has nothing to do with the structure on the bottom. So it's an entirely different learning curve. It could be a mud line. It could be anything unique like that. But that's the structure that the fish are going to use in a Great Lake. It's not a mid-lake reef. It's not a transition of boulders into something else, or a point that you'd be thinking about when we're around here fishing our traditional inland lakes. It's you really have to start thinking like a Great Lakes charter captain, and they're looking for seagulls feeding, or they're looking for a current seam on the surface, or they're driving 20 miles to find water that's 2 degrees warmer. That's structure out there. So
Yep.
we're gonna have to dig deep. It's not in our wheelhouse. We have very little experience on the Great Lakes, but we're gonna try to break all those memories and that thought process, and we are gonna try to do it our way, with the way we've been having success.
How much time are you going to have to be able to go out and search?
Well, Dylan's there now.
I'm in the
with
hotel right now, so
Nice.
with 8 tournaments right now, I got my paid time off burnt down to about 0. So I've
Right.
actually fished some tournaments when I was supposed to be working. So
We'll cut that out. We'll make sure we don't hear
cut that part out. Yeah. So no, they're over it now. They figured it out, but it's easier to ask for forgiveness. But
Yeah,
I'll
for
be
sure.
I'll be heading out tomorrow night. I was there yesterday, so fished a bit on Sunday, and it's a Friday Saturday tournament, so we'll have the whole team there pre-fishing. So the 2 of the other guys are there now, and then I'll fish on Wednesday and Thursday.
Excellent. So we don't give any secrets away or whatever. Give us a scenario where you've been in a situation where you've had to come up with something unique, in order to either produce fish, maybe even if it was something where you pulled out a win.
I'd let Dylan answer that, because probably one of my greatest memories I've ever had tournament fishing, and it just happened to happen on Lake Vermilion, and it wasn't the past win. It was our state championship win in 2017, and this was way outside of the box. But I'll let him tell the story. He tells it better than I do.
yeah. But in 2017, we won the state championship on Lake Vermilion, and we did it in a real unique way, which was pulling crankbait spinning rods. We had a real, it was probably 400, 500, 600 yards of a stretch of rock that we just had to make as many passes as we possibly could over the top of it. So we decided to use a cranks that could run 25 to 30 feet on 10-pound braid, so that we could just cast these cranks out as quick as we could and run them across this stretch, reel them in, turn the boat around, cast them out, and keep going again. So we basically worked this real short stretch over for 8 hours both days. I think we might have left it once or twice. But it was definitely a tournament of mind power, because the first day it took us a long time to put the first fish on the card. Kind of like what we talked about earlier, how it's easy to just go back to old ways of how you've caught them in the past. But we stuck with it, and I think at noon, 12:30, we went back to back with a 29.5 and a 30 3/4. And those, I think, our first 2 fish on the card, if I remember right.
That was our first 2 fish, and
yeah. So that was and we figured that out in pre-fish. That wasn't a game day figure out. But yeah,
that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, that was definitely a crazy way to catch them for sure.
Yeah, but to pull crankbaits of that size on a medium light spinning rod that's one of the things where it's like you'd never do that. That's like a complete Seymour operation. But there was a very, very specific reason for that, and Dylan touched on that. It was a pretty short run, so if you were gonna let out lead, or even have a counter reel that you can't cast, and you're sitting there and you're letting all your line out, and you gotta make a short run and then turn around and get back on that, you probably lose an hour of time just trying to deploy your baits. With the spinning rod, we figured we can buzz over it, and then we can reel them up, we can turn around, and you can bomb cast, and a cast plus about 2 sweeps, you're down grinding on the bottom. And we didn't have to get real precise with line counters, like on suspended type of fish, knowing exactly where your baits are, because we were grinding them in the rocks 100% of the time. Yep. So you could just see when they're hitting the rocks. They literally, if you were fishing that thing clean and not hitting the rocks constantly, you wouldn't get bit at all. So those crankbaits had to be grinding entirely in the rocks, which
So
also made for an interesting day too, because you're snagged all the time.
right.
And
I was
that's
gonna
where
say.
the speed, that's where the speed and the efficiency of the spinning rod really came in. Funny
Yeah.
story on that. We were like a week removed from the tournament, and apparently there were some homeowners watching. After day one, they knew we were leading and kind of picked out our boat, and they had a view to where we were fishing. So I guess we had some spectators that we didn't know about. But about a week later, that person reached out to Dylan through Facebook on Messenger and said, "Hey, I know what crankbait you're using." And he goes, "Yeah, right. How do you know that?" He goes, "We've been picking them up on the shoreline for the last 4 or 5 days. That's how many crankbaits we were losing. We'd get snagged, we'd break them off, we'd throw a new one on."
Yeah.
I think over the course of the practice and that tournament, I know I went through 30 plus, and we probably 30 each. But that was the sacrifice he had to make, and it's always something unique and different, thinking outside of the box, willingness to battle through snags, lose crankbaits. Oftentimes that's what it takes to win. Whenever you hear someone that won, it's always something that was a little bit unique. It's generally not the run of the mill stuff. So we're always trying to figure out that, how to crack that code and do something a little bit abnormal.
Yeah, that reminds me of a certain situation I was in. And I'm guessing you guys have had this, I'm hoping, but have you ever had a tournament where you thought you were just so dialed in, you had the best pre-fish and you just fell flat on your face? Or am I the only one?
I think you're talking about my whole tournament career at 20.
Right. Those are the worst, man. I'll tell you what. So I'll go back to 2018. The first time I ever fished a NWT event as a pro, Dylan Nussbaum won it. I had the best pre-fish, and I would wait till nobody was back in this area, and I'd fly back there, and man, it was 28, 29, 28, 29. Fishing some really snaggy stuff, like you're saying. I could not have been more excited. And then one little simple wind shift completely turned that tournament around. And I kind of felt it coming. I'm like, this is too good to be true. Like, I mean, and that is, but we've all kind of went through that. And I cannot think of a single tournament that we've done good in or won that we were on a bite that we said, this is going to win it. Mm-hmm. It seems like you might just get a piece of the puzzle, and that's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Although last year for the Graha, Joe and I were consistently whacking fish all week long. But we probably caught a few more than we probably should have. We probably should have let off a little bit. But that's probably the only time that I've for sure felt that it was going to be good. Not necessarily, we're going to win this thing, but Joe and I kind of went out the game day morning. We didn't even really have like a 1 through 5 for spots. Like normally we kind of have our day planned out, ifs this and ifs that, and here's where we're going to go and stuff. And we really only agreed on a start spot and just kind of went with the flow from there. And I think that's been something that we've kind of tried to replicate in the future, is not necessarily planning out your day before you get on the water, kind of reading more of the conditions that the day is giving you and going with the punches of that sort. It just seems to make more sense. It's a lot harder to do, obviously, but I think that's one of the things we've definitely tried to implement.
Yeah, I would say that is a big change in the past. When we even go back 3 years ago, we would have it really mapped out. We're going here for this amount of time. If X doesn't happen, we're going to spot B and we're doing this. And that's kind of back to fishing the memory thing, and that can be a real trap. Now we get in the best pre-fish we can, put in the most hours, try to pick up as many clues, and we're really deciding when we're sitting there in the takeoff line on where we're going to go, and that's really by reading the conditions and what the lake has to offer on that particular day. If it's cloudy, if it's sunny, where the wind's coming from, instead of just getting really fixated on going to spot A because it worked 2 days prior.
Yeah. Right.
So more design on the fly, and that's really helped us.
Yeah. You ever been in that situation where you're getting ready to blast off and you've kind of, well, like you said, you may have gone to a pre-fishing or whatever, and things just aren't together. You think you got a spot to go, and about the time you're ready to blast off, you make that change of a decision and say we're going the other way.
Yeah, that's really what Dylan alluded to there. No, Graha could have been any of those 5 because we were on really good fish on that win. I think any of those 5 spots could have produced the W, and we didn't have it narrowed down at all, and we took off out, and I was almost like, wonder which one he's heading to. And that's totally different because we're always in 100% agreement. And I think that's what makes us really good tournament partners is we're always, in sync with what we want to do and fully agreeing on the strategy and the approach. And on that day, we're just feeling confident that we could just go fishing.
Yeah.
And that's a good spot to be in.
Oh, right. Sure. So, Dylan, you said you've only been fishing for 8 years as far as competitive goes?
Yeah, let's see. I think I fished my first tournament in 2015 or 2016.
Yeah, and Joe, you've been at it for a while, right?
Yeah, it should be my 23rd year of fishing tournament.
Okay, so how did you guys end up getting together on this thing?
Well, it was a little bit like a blind date, actually, which sounds kind of real funny. It came about in a real odd way. He just he called me one day. Well, I'll back up even more. So I own a outdoor products company. We build fishing rods, JT Outdoor Products, and I was assembling a pro staff team, and had a recommendation by a friend to say, you got to call these guys in Grand Rapids, Hang Loose Guide Service, bunch of really good guys, tournament anglers. They're always on fish, and they're cool guys. So I reached out. Actually, my staff manager I think he reached out, and they seemed to be interested. And we met up just real briefly. I think Dylan was kind of sitting in the background. Don't even know if we spoke a whole lot, but a couple months later, I was at home and my phone rings and it's Dylan. He said, "Hey, I'm looking for a tournament partner. You want to fish a tournament?" And I thought, boy, that's a little bit weird, but
that's a big forward.
The bigger weirdo me said that. Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. So I said yes. So a little bit like kind of like a blind date. For connecting tournament partners, but showed up at our first event. It was actually down on the river and didn't know what to expect because I didn't even know any of the other guys in the tournament that would be part of our team, hadn't met them either, and pull up in the parking lot and noticed that they were using the window to go in and out of to access the boat. And I said to myself, this is my kind of people.
Well, did he?
Didn't catch that part. You cut out a bit.
Oh, I said, did he at least buy you a steak dinner afterwards?
Yeah, we've a lot of those along the way for the last 5 years. But yeah, I mean, our tournament, team, we're really a band of brothers now, and that's how we all met. And when you travel with people and you go to state championships and you pile 6 guys into campers that are made for 3 and you spend a week together, you learn a lot about people. You either grow real strong bonds or you all break apart. And we've grown stronger bonds through all that stuff. And we travel together, we room together, and it's it's awesome. We love it, and it truly is a band of brothers.
Excellent.
Well, you guys, I know you probably, Dylan especially, want to get some sleep here tonight because you're probably going to get up at 4 o'clock. So, hey, we really appreciate you guys. And we're going to be watching all you guys and Tom because Tom was a great guy to talk to, you guys as well. And you guys want to beat the best. Well, Tom is one of the best. So,
Sure.
And you guys are as well. So it'll be exciting to watch you guys for 2 days and battle back and forth. And we'll be watching the AIM. I know they do a final weigh-in after the tournament, and we'll be watching with bated breath to see who actually comes out on top. And good luck to you guys. We appreciate you coming, and hey, go get them.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. It's going to be a
bet.
fun showdown, and Well, like you said, if you're going to win, you want to do it against the best. So we're excited for the opportunity.
Excellent. You guys always have a standing invitation if you want to come out to the Columbia.
Hey,
Yeah.
We're probably gonna have to take you up on that for sure.
yeah, got to take you up on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, when you
Okay.
get sick of standing on the ice in February, that's the time to come out here, and I'll definitely we'll definitely send you in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
All right,
Appreciate
fellas.
your time. Thanks
right,
for
thank
having
you.
us on.
Bye.